last conference of today. Fortunately, it has to end one day, and we're going to talk about a subject which is very passionate and a very specific subject, which is advertising and the means that the distributors have to communicate on their products. And the problem around vaping is that several words are being used that are still in the taboo atmosphere and could cause traumas, for example, if I can call them that way. And cigarette is, of course, a taboo word, or smoking is another buzzword, which can still remain a bit in the taboo atmosphere. So my nice... So one of the examples is, okay, I can buy an electronic cigarette and I can stop smoking from one day to the other. There's no worries. So very innovative tendencies. But how does it work? How is it possible for the advertising world to introduce an electronic cigarette to the consumers? And how sensible do they need to be on certain levels? I have next to me Stéphane Martin. He's the director of ARPP. That's the regulation authority when it comes to professionals in the advertising world. And we're going to look into what the law says in France and what could happen tomorrow as well. So could we maybe take a look at the situation in Europe and the United States as well? And to my left, I have Mr. COSSOU, strategic director with Sportfive, is part of the group, a French group specialized in advertising for the sports world. And we also have Mr. Francis Caballero. He's a lawyer in Paris. And he's also a member of the Clubinet Association. And he's going to talk about the regulations, actual regulations on the advertising markets today. So before we enter into the debates, we'd like to see a small video that is going to launch us into that world of advertising. So thank you for this video. There's a lady who's very explicit.
You know, being single has its perks, but when it comes to smoking, smelling like an ashtray is not the ideal aphrodisiac. That's what I love about Blue. When I switched to Blue electronic cigarettes, not only did I feel better about myself, I felt the freedom to have a cigarette without the guilt. With Blue e-cigs, there's no tobacco smoke, only vapor. Now when I go to public places that don't allow smoking, I can whip out my Blue and know that I won't scare any guys away. Blue e-cigs have been an absolute savior for me. I'm envied by every smoker who has to leave the party and go outside and smoke. And let's be honest, there is nothing sexy about going outside in the rain or freezing your butt off just to take a puff. Since introducing the first electronic cigarette pack that recharges your e-cigs, Blue has always been about giving you freedom. Freedom to have a smoke when you want, where you want. Now the folks at Blue have created something even better. They have completely redesigned the starter pack to make every aspect of e-cigs simple and easy. With this cool new starter pack, I can have a smoke how I want, but without the smell, the ash, or the stink I look from others. The starter pack is in stores nationwide. Just look for the sexy Blue display. Wherever you are, Blue is close by. Now let's talk about all the new features you get to play with. The pack isn't just a cute carrying case, it also recharges your e-cigarette batteries. Just charge the pack, and you'll always have a fully charged Blue. Where can you charge it? The question is, where can't you charge this thing? The new starter pack comes with multiple recharging options for your active lifestyle. Everything you need for recharging is now included in the starter pack. The Blue starter pack is as slim as a smartphone and as tall as a pack of cigarettes. It comfortably fits wherever you'd normally carry cigarettes. And it even fits in the pockets of the tightest jeans. It's always ready when I am. It's like the smartphone of e-cigs. The Blue battery management system ensures maximum performance and ease of use. This thing is sleek, hot, and blue. Blue makes it easier. For me, Blue gives me all the fun and none of the guilt of having a cigarette. Blue believes in freedom. Your freedom. Pick up the new Blue Starter Pack, available at retailers nationwide.
Mr. Martin, we're looking for the boundaries here. Absolutely, when a new market emerges, then every country will try to find its best way to advertise, of course. And professionals in France and in Europe, of course, well, haven't introduced this kind of publicity. They didn't want to go that far and to flirt with in all kinds of ways you can think of it. Of course, they didn't want to do this, and they didn't want to be put on the same level as regular tobacco. So this lady has always shown or wanted to make the difference between regular cigarettes and e-cigarettes. And we, of course, have to establish our own limits. United States themselves are going to regulate concerning the advertising world. We know today that the law is not very clear and could be subject to interpretation, of course. Is it possible in the advertising world? And what are we evolving to concerning the advertising world in France and Europe and the United States? What are the tendencies? What is the environment, actually? Well, we're going to look also for the translation. It's going to be easier, but let's read some things. In the United States, there's the Food and Drug Administration, which is very well known. It's a public authority when it comes to food and other consumer goods. There's a number of rules set out, but for the launching of the product and the advertising worlds, there's also a number of rules. For example, it's not allowed to sell any tobacco products to minors, which is the case in many countries. And of course, in the American law, it's very important that you have to prove that your product is safe for the consumers. The industrial world, of course, are explicitly mentioning that the e-cigarette is less harmful for your health than the tobacco product. So indeed, FDA will authorize or not to the producers to stay on the market or not. But of course, when the products can be freely sold, then it will be possible to make advertising campaigns. So there will be some sort of a liberalism, let's say. So the product can be sold, marketing can follow, and the advertising world can communicate in the way they want. And in Europe, we are in an emerging market, let's say, and most countries do not have rules concerning the advertising markets, but they are introducing these rules mainly in the southern part of Europe. In Portugal, for example, with a new law in Spain as well. And there, a number of rules are set out for publicity spots on television, for example. And, for example, you can't do any advertising campaigns with products that cannot be sold to minors, and just put them just before program for children starts. So that's one of the examples. So this is something new. It's the first country where the electronic cigarettes would introduce certain rules within the advertising world related to public health, of course. And we have the European directive, and this year, this is very hot of the needle, let's say, the tobacco directive will be applied in a few months' time and has not been transposed to national legislation as yet. Every country has 2 years to do this. And in May 2016, no advertising can be done for the big audience for electronic cigarettes containing nicotine. And this is for the operators. So in 2 years, Of course, it will depend on every country, but they have 2 years' time to transpose this law, international law. And this is the evolution we see linked to the regulatory framework. What do you mean by publicity for the big audience? There's some websites, there's publicity on radio and television, etc. Well, all means of communication are implied here. You have a professional press, of course, for e-cigs, and for tobacco, this is already the case. No tobacco can be shown in any advertising campaigns. And only B2B advertising is possible. But the directive, also, for example, here within this fair, there is a possibility to advertise, of course. This is only B2B, or to the professionals or the distributors. So this is what the directive entails. For France, in 2014, the markets will need to develop itself, and there's no rules when it comes to advertising or communication on e-cigarettes. So we will have to regulate, we will have to show some discipline ourselves when it comes to advertising. And the market will auto-regulate itself, will have to establish its own rules. And this will probably be the case for the next few months until the directive comes. Today, you have to show some self-discipline, as you said. But are there any bad pupils in the class sometimes? Well, ARPP is an organization that helps professionals from this sector to communicate on e-cigarettes. And in France, of course, before sending out something on television, some people are consulted, or organizations and associations are consulted. The professionals are also consulted. And since 2011, we see indeed some publicity spots on electronic cigarettes, not on all the television stations, but some. And often, other means of communication ask us some questions before to give us some extra information on what we want to do. And some, of course, people are scared that we are going too much towards the traditional tobacco product. And of course, about the substitutes, we also have to take these into account. There's like a gray zone. And for example, for the products, alternatives to tobacco products, there's indeed some associations. And recently, in 2011 it was, if I remember well, they had foreseen this problem, and they drew a line between what can happen if somebody leaves the traditional cigarette and passes on to the electronic cigarette. So there's another way to see the fact of quitting smoking. NSM is another example. So you have the nicotine products, the products that help you stop smoking, and then you have all the rest. So this law is from March last year, and it stated, okay, it is not allowed to sell e-cigarettes to minors. And it is not allowed either to launch publicity campaigns towards minors, or to show any images, or to show youngsters, for example, during these publicity campaigns. That's something else. Well, about the code of advertising, the authorities need to be collaborating on this as well, of course. And it's a whole legislative process that you have to go through, of course. And what remains is, because I'm narrowing it down to something, but what remains is a number of possibilities to communicate on the electronic cigarettes. And many people ask themselves, okay, you have the law, the E20 law, a French law which is there since 20 years, and it prohibits all advertising campaigns on tobacco products. You can't do any sponsoring anymore. It's a law that closed the advertising world on tobacco products, direct or indirect to consumers. And it's very important to make the distinction. For example, you cannot use any types of tobacco products in advertising campaigns. And for the e-cigarettes, it's difficult. It's even a penal law, which means that if you have any infractions, that you can be brought before court. So it's a penal law. And the whole court is implied here. It's the media who are concerned here. And that's why we are very vigilant. And not penal law, of course, but criminal law. And that's why we have to stay in our advertising world. The professionals are indeed looking into this. They want to help the professionals. Okay, when it comes to advertising to minors, no, absolutely not. This is strictly prohibited. And blue, okay, would not be possible here in France because it's very linked to tobacco products. The way of smoking, the way, also the packaging, for example, is strictly linked or very linked to tobacco products. And it's a very ambiguous presentation, of course. And the comparison, of course, between e-cigarettes and electronic cigarettes needs to be limited. So you cannot have this. And all these extreme terms, of course, we like all kinds of comparisons within the advertising world, but we need to avoid extremes. But it is, of course, possible, and that's why there's publicity, fortunately, to use the terms that we used before, that we discussed before, like vaping, terms that are strictly linked to the topic. Electronic cigarettes, but you have to present these products in a neutral way, but stick to words as electronic cigarette, vaping, the different aromas. And the thing, of course, is for youngsters, these aromas are very attractive. That's also a subject of discussion in the United States. Well, the FDA has indeed accepted this, and Code of Advertising will indeed also be published in short time in the United Kingdom. Sometimes things can change. So all information, commercial information, needs to be put forward. We have to be vigilant, but the profession has already fixed a number of rules, set out rules in order to have good codes of conduct. It's astonishing, because the first thing that strikes me is that, and we all know this, I smoked for 18 years, and I stopped thanks to this product. And same thing, if I ask people around me, does it work? If people ask me, okay, does it work? And I just say, yes, it works for me. And it is impossible to apparently it is difficult to distinguish tobacco products from cigarettes in advertising campaigns. Yeah, that's why there's advertising agencies, of course, to help you in your creativity. And the idea is that you have to know your market, you have to commit to it, and don't try to go in the wrong direction. You have to use scientific data. We've seen direct or indirect propaganda or advertising campaigns for tobacco products. This was prohibited. And today we have the same situation for electronic cigarettes. But does it mean that tomorrow, for example, if you have a magazine or if a scientist would say, okay, the electronic cigarette is a good thing, it's an alternative to regular tobacco, what would happen? Is he going to promote in some way the electronic cigarette, or what is going to happen?
You know, we do not have the same freedom, and we must distinguish, the two things. Members of a forum could say, yeah, it works very well, I could stop smoking. It's just incredible. But here again, it depends on whom is saying that. You need to have a real forum, not, false forum or false professionals or, you need to distinguish commercial practices which are not right. You need to define the context, to define really the situation and how to use, that identity. And when you identify, all those topics and also advertising is just something demanding. So, freedom of press is essential. You have controls, of course, but everything which is linked to blogs or social networks, you really need to have a moderation to mitigate them. Okay, as regard to that kind of idea, could be like press, could be web. How shall we order it? I mean, there's no hole in the system. We must be clear. For television, we have the possibility to have a more complex system for vision before diffusion, plus all the possibility to control after. Which is public authorities. And public authorities actually were made because of the problems during, of course, the war and during fascism or, those problems. So democracies tried to find a tool and to use it with trying to avoid monopolies. So at the time, we were in a very specific context, of course, different from ours. And we needed to, have the impression of a stronger control. But the laws are the same. It's difficult, to follow 10,000 websites instead of one broadcast on TV. Well, we are not in China, and we do not have so many employees everywhere in those offices. But anyway, you have about 2 million adverts viewed before broadcasts. And this is not democracy. The models which are applied in the democracies. We have here a responsibility. And the main idea is to really focus on that, to see how authorities are made. Good. Thank you. So that, having said that framework, I would like with Guillaume COSSOU, which is director, manager in sports, what is your idea? We have Eco of a French brand which tried to, work with a French sportsman. And Guillaume, could you tell us what is your experience when you have a client who is coming saying, well, I have a wonderful product for stopping smoking. It looks like cigarette. It's very efficient. I have the willingness to put it on, for example, cars or balls. First of all, we say, okay, keep calm. We cannot do everything in sports. The main idea when we saw the explosion of big brands, well, actors in sports, we mean federations, clubs, they were a bit afraid. And they said, are we allowed to do that or not? So people were a bit, afraid. They were fearing a little bit, and it was not possible to make sponsoring, and not only for legal basis, but also because sports institutions had that self-regulation possibilities. In fact, then we had an evolution, and we saw the evolution around, cigarettes, regulations, and even for football, professional football. At the beginning of January, actually, people just prohibited clubs to sign sponsorships with cigarette companies. And this summer, they changed their mind. They said, okay, we can make it because we had no answers from public authorities, and in that sense, we can make it. So since one company makes it, everyone can do it. That's the main idea. And in sports, we are in a universe, in a world which is very open. You have a lot of targets, and really, you have so many players, so many actors. What about that? Is not a paradox, quitting smoking and the risks in sports? Because, as a definition, sportsmen, should have, a very, very healthy life and hygiene. So, what do you think of that? How do you react? Well, I have the same plan. I would say that even sportsmen smoke. Fabien Barthez, remember that in '98, he was, smoking a cigarette after his victory. So, this is a nice example. Cigarette is a taboo in the sports world. You have a lot of sportsmen people smoking, and when people know that, well, it makes a scandal. And in Barcelona, we have a guy who admitted smoking, and then it was another scandal. And even other persons, the cigarette during vacation, here again, people said, well, sportsmen must not smoke, so it is a taboo and that's all. But now we have e-cigarettes products which are an alternative to that, and want to, help people to quit smoking and have something new. So we are working on different studies and made on that. So you are waiting for the next goal who is, about to smoke and trying to improve his quality of life or hygiene. Yes, Fabien Barthez, you were dealing with in '98, was smoking, but now in 2014, he is promoting an e-cigarette brand. So, we need to really work on that. We know that sportsmen smoke. Maybe they do not confess it. This is another point, but they do. So have you a lot of solicitations and by brands and vendors? Yes, very much. And, as I was saying, different organizations made self prohibition, and they tried actually to go on. So in that case, we've had a situation that changed in some institutions, so opportunities were created. The football club, the football league said, okay, so they're favorable, so they will take sponsors like e-cigarette sponsors. Well, no, but they can sponsor, e-cigarettes can sponsor some clubs of the league. What about you, Mr. Lawyer? Do you have Mr. Caballero, do you have, what is your reaction in order to see what happened, that transposition of TPD with, advertising, maybe. Did you have some concrete cases, as we said, with the E20 law in France? What is the impact on sports? Is that coherent? Is that difficult for vendors to have an evolution in that sector? Yes and no. Till now, advertising for e-cigarette is not regulated in France. That's it. First, it is free. You can do whatever you want. And if I'm here, it's because I just struggled for an e-cigarette distributor who was attacked by the manufacturers because he was supporting e-cigarette, and the CNBC just considered it was not a good advertising. So anyway, it is a French case. People trying to define the rights of the smokers. I am also, a lawyer for those association. The E20 law must be applied. I am a lawyer which is against tobacco. I am also in favor of for different things. But anyway, we must verify how these laws are made. So e-cigarette has not made 73,000 deaths and so many money to the society. So we must see how it will evolve, and in that frame, you're free, but pay attention because you have threats all over the world. So just a word. What do you mean by threats, fines and closure of companies? No. I was dealing with the law, French laws, and in Europe we have a directive, and people said, I do not agree on that actually, because people said there's no hole in the system. And then they added that Europe wanted to prohibit in the future the advertising for e-cigarettes in all media. This is quite true. All media? But wait a second. We need an expert, as I am, to see what is the European directive. It looks like the Vape law of 76. We had here the opportunity to have the list of things that were prohibited. So you have a lot of, mistakes in the system, as well as the alcohol. You have a lot of mistakes and problems. Anyway, it's not here my purpose, if I may. But as I said, it will come abroad, of course, maybe not in France, but people who, struggle for e-cigarette could contest the legal aspect of that directive in Europe, which regulates advertising in favor of e-cigarette, whereas it cannot do it, because public health does not make part of the harmonization. And they say the state members must prohibit that advertising. So, in that case, all members should prohibit every kind of advertising. So, I would like to see that, to show that it is not good, that e-cigarette has also bad aspects, and, prohibiting totally e-cigarette. I'm not dealing with indirect advertising, but direct advertising, for example, in a second time will be prohibited in France. We'll have a law from the Minister of Health, which is getting prepared to transpose that directive. So she, Mrs. Touraine, will prohibit all those points. So we need to analyze that law, see if we'll prohibit indirect advertising for e-cigarette, let me say that indirect advertising for tobacco is a bit vicious. And what does that mean? Because, a lot of people are ignorant on that. It's something different from tobacco, which recall tobacco. That's it. Camel Trophy, Marlboro Classic. Bon, it means that if you produce e-cigarettes, you will create a branch of watches, of clothes, and you have a name, you create a name which will recall something already existing. So I don't know if we will regulate indirect advertising. So having said that, we need to make a difference between the already existing advertising and the future, on tobacco, of course. Then the law will depend on your behavior. Of course, I've been working for years now, and displays were not illicit for alcohol or cigarettes and and those products. So if you abuse, that's not good. So please pay attention to your behavior. Listen to the advice that are given, and also, in order to conclude, another topic, if I may, I think the e-cigarette. You're not defending yourself in a correct way, because manufacturers want to have like a monopoly and to continue on that, and then have a prohibition or to prohibit every kind of advertising. So they want to destroy you. And till now, I think this is horrible. On a legal point of view, on a health point of view, and in all the processes that we had for my clients, for example, it was quite difficult, and people were very unhappy with the results. So we really need to pay attention to make differences between all these terms. So producers will not be able to have a prohibition of e-cigarettes in the parallel system. But as I said, you are not defending yourself so well because you are a bit behind the tobacco industry, and you need to make progresses on that and understand how it works. But that is not a cigarette. Yeah, I know. It's, steel, it's we have products. Well, please do not insist on that. We do agree. So you should instead of being weak, you should attack, because we are in an incredible situation. So you should really pay attention to your product and see how competition is made. And actually, it's them. They are not. It is unfair competition. And with unfair competition, I mean that they have a monopoly, those producers. And, a monopoly in our society is not good. We cannot admit that. Monopoly is not possible. It is an abuse of power. So you should do a lot of things. But first of all, you should seize the competition commission, that is the specialist in that area. You should have a lot of advice from them, and then they will help you. They should help you. And, we really need to pay attention to those aspects. Competition is important. We mustn't abuse of competition, and loyal and unfair competition is not acceptable. And to conclude, I would like to say that those people who have monopoly, like producers, even for games, they have monopolies also on games, and that's not good. And for example, they wanted they wanted to implement different things, even for supermarkets, and they try to make. They try to change some situation in the big distribution. Anyway, this is a very precise case in France. But if I may, sometimes it's not acceptable to have the situation of harassment, because it is harassment. So please, do try to react. Do try to change also the situation, because people don't mind. People just don't mind. They have pressure. They have. They say, well, I am in that monopoly, and they abuse of their monopoly. Sorry. So they want to have new conquests, new markets. So good luck to you all.
I can imagine that stimulates creativity, absolutely. And I'm going to come back to a very important point. This is the way you have to respect these rules. Alcohol, for example, cannot be sponsored. And the brands, Heineken, Carlsberg, they have activities within sports. They are a partner of some cups. The Champions League, for example, as well. So they're linked, and they try to avoid some laws. So they have specific brands to be sponsoring the sports world. I don't know how you see this technically, but are these strategies to create a certain image towards the outer world, or absolutely? You go to sports to have a certain notoriety, and you want to be well known as a brand, and you want to create a story around it. And you want to create a logo. But it's very complicated, because you can communicate on a brand. So if you see a logo, for example, in the street, it's difficult for me to link it to a certain brand. Absolutely. This is communication strategy. You cannot only concentrate on one campaign. You have to do several things. You have to try to penetrate different markets. So it's an addition of several markets and several groups that you have to obtain in order to get a brand to be well known. There's no way to avoid law. Look at the example of Formula One. Tobacco was completely put out of Formula One. And Heineken, for example, there's no worries. You can do that, whereas it is an alcohol-containing product. So where is the logic in that? It's not completely legal, let's say. The French television sends out to the world images where people are seeing alcohol brands with alcohol. So Davidoff as well. There was a tournament called Davidoff, and this is a tobacco producer. So incredible. Well, I had this case before court, but unfortunately, I lost it. So you see that there are different matters playing. Master, would you say that my vaporizer, and I'm using my vaporizer, do you think that so the further you go away from colors, from all kinds of characteristics which are introduced into this market of electronic cigarettes, so everything which has to do with graphical design, etc., do you think this would be better for the industry or not? You have to do the counterattack, because the electronic cigarette has a number of qualities. The environment, for example. publicity for the blue cigarette, blue e-cigarette there you saw before. Well, with my e-cigarette, I don't need an ashtray, which means that this is better for the environment. So you have to try to convince people based on certain principles. No, this is not what you have to do. What you have to do is you have to spread the good information on electronic cigarettes. For example, the fact that it's better for your health than regular cigarettes, that it's not as bad for environment as regular cigarettes. The cigarette that many years ago, in the 16th century, was introduced. So the evolution is going faster now with the electronic cigarettes, and they're better for your health. Can we, maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, be accused of the fact that we empoison people with the electronic cigarette? Well, if somebody dies and he says, okay, I've been smoking electronic cigarettes for 30 years, well, then I think there's a certain danger in this. And, well, I recently lost a case before court, and this was a totally illogical case, by the way. I shouldn't have lost it. And they said, okay, this is a fiscal product, not a consumer good. So as soon as information was well known, so that there's a small risk with e-cigarettes, but the risk is well known, and then we can be indeed accused of something. But as soon as, or as long as the information is not well known by scientists, community, and then it's difficult to accuse us afterwards because we didn't know it at a time when we produced it. Yes, but the risk, according to the judge, the risk was indeed known for tobacco. But for the electronic cigarette, I cannot say if it's harmful or not on the long run. We'll have to wait and see. I'm going to ask Gilles to show us a last video, interesting video, an advertising campaign from the United Kingdom. And the product is almost shown, as you will see on the video.
Yes, I know. Very good.
Look who's over there.
He's walking.
So, what have I missed?
Qu'est-ce que vous avez manqué?
What did you miss? So he went out to smoke a cigarette, and we didn't see his packet of cigarettes. He touched his shirt, yeah, but we didn't see the packet. So it's very sensible. Yeah, for me it's very difficult. This kind of advertising, I don't know. Well, I didn't understand the publicity campaign very well. Depends on your interpretation, of course. Well, British creativity is very high, of course. And with the prohibition, European prohibition of tobacco products in the advertising world, well, you try to search for the limits, and for e-lights, I don't know what the actual product is, but they try to push the brand forward in a family environment, a very nice environment, and then we're touching family values, which is kind of dangerous, I would say. So that's pushing limits. So people are being stimulated to think about this. What do you think about this kind of advertising? Well, it's creativity-wise, it's perfect. If you're within the regulatory framework, okay. You can maybe draw outside of the box sometimes. staying within the framework, of course. Well, in France, you would never see this on television, of course. The brands would have to use other ways of communicating. Well, in the United States, where there's free speech, and this is the first rule in the Constitution, by the way, I think in general they wouldn't do this. They would never venture this kind of campaigns. They would never try to launch this kind of campaigns. They would never go so far. So freedom of speech for the American is very important, even more important than in France, even though we have a very important tradition as well. I think that the professionals who are in the room here will think of the date 2016, and they are maybe afraid that the advertising world could also be impacted by it. What do you think that which processes will be implied in the transposition of the directive into national legislation? Will they be incorporated in the national legislation? Who are going to be the players, the actors in this? As our colleague has said, it is going to take place in 2016, and we are not sure what is going to happen. We will have to see. And this will have to be discussed in Parliament as well. Maybe May 2016. Okay, that's maybe too soon to have a full understanding of the subject, because it's only going to start then. And maybe we're lagging a bit behind, but so as said before, you have 2 years to put European legislation into national legislation. And then afterwards, the different states will lay down laws on advertising. Well, this is a world I don't know very well. I'm not sure what the government will do in order to regulate the advertising campaigns on the electronic cigarettes. Yes, this is a very vast subject, of course. It should integrate this. And the only thing which has been made publicly during the Tobacco Day in 2013, 1 year ago, well, they said that it would automatically electronic cigarettes would be assimilated to tobacco products. But I'm not convinced if that is actually the case. Still, CSA, for example, has communicated officially, and they asked, okay, what do you think of television publicity on electronic cigarettes? So there is communication going on between government and between the advertising world. And for the moment, in some countries, it is authorized, but you need to go by a law sometimes. And we're not sure whether it will restrict the advertising world or not. But I think that the minister in France will slightly go towards a prohibition of certain things within the advertising world. And of course, more and more people from the scientific world, and doctors think that electronic cigarettes and tobacco products are on the same level when it comes to toxicity. So there's all kinds of aspects you have to take into account. There's a lot of things that are going to change in the next few years. And also you have to imply the different associations within the sector. They have been sitting around the table, by the way, and discussing these health subjects. But the text itself concerning the advertising world could be based on what comes from Europe. But of course, the member states can have a certain margin, a free margin of doing whatever they want within the advertising world, respecting, of course, European legislation. So I don't think they will authorize it without any legislation at all. So if a law is voted, as for example, tobacco products law, so just imagine this would happen. This prohibition would happen also for the electronic cigarettes as it was done for the regular tobacco products. Well, I think then that every vendor in principle could be pursued, could be brought before court, which seems very illogical. And you need to take some precautions. But personally, I think that drugs, in whichever form, should be prohibited, of course. But we're not talking about the drug here. And I think there's a very large debate going on. There's liberty of speech involved. There's a lot of elements involved here. And Ministry of Health said last year that the electronic cigarette, that advertising on electronic cigarettes was indeed linked to regular tobacco products. So that's the opinion they have now. Also, people need to be sensibilized on this subject. So total restriction is a bridge too far. The toxicity of electronic cigarettes is not the same as for a regular tobacco product, so you have to make the distinction between both of them. And the ministers and everybody within the government will have to look into this file. But I don't think that I think that good collaboration is possible when there's a good exchange of information between members of parliament and the health professionals and professionals from within the electronic cigarette market. What happens if government or if penal court says, okay, this is something you did, and well, as a lawyer, and if there's indeed an infraction against law, then I would bring them to justice, to court, of course. I had a case against Dan Mann on publicity on a tobacco product. And if you look at the directive, it's not clear whether the publicity on a product itself is prohibited or not. Okay, for a packet of cigarettes, it is prohibited. So they had a fine of several 80,000 euros for this. Yes, you have to take the fact that you can be taken before court into account, of course. They're not going to prison, of course. It's just a matter of paying, and for a tobacco producer who makes dozens, well, millions and maybe billions of euros a year, it's peanuts, of course. And they're going to say, okay, $20,000 is peanuts. So we are looking towards the public, towards the audience now, sorry. And would somebody from the audience like to ask a question to these members of panel? Are there any questions? Even though he's not going to ask his question, I'm going to look at him anyway. He is a friend of mine. And you talked about business-to-business communication before. Is it authorized? Yes, absolutely. It is authorized. And of course, for tobacco products, we're still in debate, but business-to-business tobacco publicity could indeed be subject to new rules in the future. Same goes for electronic cigarettes and magazines where you see publicity, for example. So, for the moment, it is possible to have publicity campaigns, B2B, B2C, but of course within the limits we were talking about before. And the responsibility is shared, of course. We often see operators who want to communicate in the media, and of course, maybe someday somebody could say, okay, we're going to charge you this much for a publicity campaign and launch it afterwards.
Just a word about that advertising in the press. You have big competitor. I'm dealing with e-cigarette branch, and it is actually the trade union of producers. I have their magazine on the first page. You have e-cigarette market, and we have an enormous article with a lot of people making advertising. They say the e-cigarette market is in a big expansion in France, but producers only register 1/4 of the sales, whereas specialized boutiques carry out excellent development, and the network is struggling against all that system. So imagine that we have that kind of situation, and really we must. It is B2B. It is B2B press. It is not sold, for private. Not at all. On TV, I saw an advertising for news, so e-cigarette sold in tobacco shops, and they have, about 15 billion turnover. There are 26,000. They have access to politicians and economy. So there no one is really defending their interest. They are exaggerating. They want to, have a monopoly. And I would like to tell you that you are young. You need to live your life. You need to have all those opportunities. So be aware of your competitors who are actually the tobacco shops. So really, we need to add to our structure different aspects, and at a technical point of view, we need to make more efforts. The message is clear. Many thanks, gentlemen, for your participation. Many thanks for your intervention. So this is the last conference. I think that in a few minutes we'll manage to have all the members of the persons organizing the conference for the excellent job. Many thanks to you all for your attention. I just recall you that on YouTube you can re-assist to the conferences with the translation. So see you soon on the social networks. See you soon. See you next year. Bye-bye.